Only in America.
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 This week on Only in America, the evangelical leaders calling for immigration solutions.
As a Christian, I believe in upholding the law, and I believe in honoring the government. And at the same time, I want to operate with a heart of compassion and grace.
And a Southern Baptist leader in Texas on how his community is engaging with the humanity of a deeply politicized issue.
But it does inform them, and what it does, it becomes a heart issue, not only a head issue.
Yeah.
It's real easy to make a whole lot of declarations. But when you're there and when you see what's going on and what's happening, and what's amazing, I don't have to go and say, you're going to go there and this is going to happen to you. I can simply say, would you be willing to go?
From the National Immigration Forum, I'm Ali Nurani. Earlier this month, a group of prominent evangelical leaders published an open statement proposing a way forward for immigrants who lack legal status. More specifically, the Evangelical Immigration Table, comprised of a broad coalition of evangelical Christian groups who advocate for a biblical approach to immigration, called for restitution-based immigration reform. The statement urges lawmakers to allow undocumented immigrants to earn legal status if they acknowledge their violation of immigration laws and pay significant fines. Danny Aiken, president of Southeastern Baptist Theological Seminary in Wake Forest, North Carolina, explained the thinking behind the statement on World Radio's podcast, The World and Everything in It.
In the statement that we issued, we're talking about the fact that we recognize, one, that what they did was a violation of the law that they admit to. And then secondly, there are imposed fines and penalties that would be paid by immigrants, but that would be done, one, in a reasonable period of time. We're talking about somewhere up to maybe 7 years. And secondly, it would be what they could reasonably achieve and be able to do. And again, we're looking at people that have not committed violent crimes. We're talking about people that are working. They're contributing to our tax base. And so, again, as a Christian, I believe in upholding the law, and I believe in honoring the government. And at the same time, I want to operate with a heart of compassion and grace. And so I'm not in favor of open borders at all, but I'm not a hardliner either. I don't see immigration as a great threat to our nation, especially if it's done reasonably and legally, that continues to also advocate for safe and secure borders. Mm-hmm. And I want all of that, and I'm not convinced it can't be done.
You know, immigration seems like it's always in the headlines, but there's no real immigration plan on the table right now in Congress. Why issue this statement right now?
Well, we have an election year coming up, and so no doubt things are going to be hot and heavy in this regard over the next 12 months. To get this out on the table now then allows persons, whether it be as representatives, senators, or the president, to position themselves on what they would like to see us do in the future. And again, Mary, I'm equally frustrated with Democrats and Republicans over this. I was talking to a good friend, Al Mohler, a couple of weeks ago, and this is a political football that gets kicked back and forth. And I would just argue again, we ultimately have to leave the fine details to our government officials. But again, if you can follow or you buy into the guidelines and the principles that we put forth, I think this does provide a way for us to move the ball.
Do you think evangelicals are more or less united on immigration matters than they were, say, a few years ago?
I know this. I'm a member of the Southern Baptist Convention, and we have put forth a couple of resolutions in the last 5 to 7 years that would be thoroughly consistent with the principles set forth by the Evangelical Roundtable. So I think when it comes to our heart, most evangelicals want to see something like this particular idea pushed forward and set forth. There's some I realize are a little bit harder, but I think, to be honest with you, most evangelicals would like to see something done here and not see this stalemate continue.
For Danny and other signatories of the statement, restitution-based reform presents a way forward on immigration that upholds both the rule of law and love for one's neighbor. A practical immigration system that balances compassion and security is within reach. It's up to our politicians to make it a reality.
Support for the National Immigration Forum comes from the Carnegie Corporation of New York, supporting innovations in education, democratic engagement, and strengthening international peace and security. And from Humanity United. When humanity is united, we can bring a powerful force for human dignity.
In a rapidly growing and changing city like Austin, Texas, how are new residents welcomed? And how do diverse congregations connect with each other? Moreover, when it comes to immigration, how do churches approach the theology so congregations see beyond the headlines? Engaging newcomers and engaging Texans to understand immigration from a broader perspective often means big changes. Changes that lead to transitions for established churches. Dr. David Smith knows firsthand how challenging and important these transitions are. As the executive director of the Austin Baptist Association, he works with old and new congregations to create communities where all Austin residents feel welcome in the pews. He also helps connect congregants who want to learn more about immigration with mission opportunities across the border in Mexico. Through his work, he's learned how important it is for people to experience the issue firsthand and how eager they are to share their stories with people back home.
We've been in Austin for the past 25 years.
Really?
Came here in 94 to pastor First Baptist Church out in Dripping Springs, which is a western suburb of Austin. It's now almost absorbed into Austin. Mm-hmm. But then for the past 19 years have been serving as the director of the Austin Baptist Association. So I have the privilege of offering direction to about 200 Southern Baptist churches in the Austin area.
Where'd you grow up?
Grew up in, well, now that we're really good friends, Indiana. For a lot of folks in the South, you know, that north-south thing becomes a big issue.
Where in Indiana?
But, Kokomo.
Kokomo, where's Kokomo?
Kokomo is north of Indianapolis by about an hour or so. And then from there moved to Colorado, where my father worked with Child Evangelism Fellowship. So I have grown up in a faith family. But, you know, enjoy being here in Austin. It's great.
I love that north of Indianapolis. I spent a little time up there. It's just, you know, it's a part of the country that a lot of people, they literally fly over.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. They're going to Chicago if they're going north of Indianapolis, for sure. Yeah.
Tell me a little about the association and what is the role of the Austin Baptist Association kind of in the region.
Okay.
And then we can kind of dive into how immigration is playing out.
Okay. Excellent. So Southern Baptist churches are voluntarily gathered in associations. In big cities, it typically takes in the counties surrounding that big city. So you'd have Houston, San Antonio, Austin, Dallas, those kinds of associations. In a rural setting, you would have a situation where they might have a couple counties to come together. In my role, my job is to cast vision for those churches to say, hey, what can we do together collectively that not any one of us can do by ourselves? And so it is a challenge to take your larger churches and connect them to medium and small sized churches, and how do you work together to advance Christ's kingdom in that. One of the biggest functions that we provide is kind of the hub or the network to plant new churches. And we are finding that new churches seem to do so much better at connecting to people that have no faith background, maybe limited faith background, or had a bad faith or bad church experience in the past. And so what we do is we bring together the resources, the realtors, the attorneys, all the pieces that need to happen to plant a new church, and then we kind of bring that to the 200-member association and say, hey, how can we help to fund this and do that? We also, because we're Baptist churches, it is helpful sometimes to have a neutral, objective person to step in to help with difficulties. And
that is very well put, by the way. Step in to help with difficulties.
There you go. That's it. But the other way I describe it is we're kind of a concierge for the churches. If they need something, we step in and we typically help them. In the old days, that was a huge function, before the internet. Hey, where do I get Bible study stuff? Now, a lot of times I tease them. They can Google better answer than I can give them in that. But Ali, beyond just our Baptist churches, and I think Austin really lends itself to this, I spend a great deal of time with the larger body of Christ, the capital C Church in Austin, and we look for ways to partner together. And one of the exciting ways in Austin is a prayer movement that's been going on for 11 years. Mm-hmm. It's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. And over the last 11 years, Austin has been prayed for every single hour.
Wow.
And we are praying that will lead to some significant changes. And because Austin not only is the home of the State University, it is also the capital. And so that brings some real uniquenesses to it. And we believe that as a church, if we get together and pray together, we're setting the environment right for the Lord to do what he wants to do. I've never read of a revival breaking out where it wasn't preceded with really unceasing prayer.
As I was thinking about this conversation, I kind of honed in on the first two roles of the association, kind of the vision casting and the church planting.
Yeah.
How does that play out as not just the demographics and the size of the region changes, but in the context of the nation's immigration debate now? For example, I saw research that made the case that first-generation Hispanic pastors were so much more successful in terms of planting churches.
Yep.
So how does that play out for the association?
In a city like Austin, which for the past 5 or 6 years has been either 1, 2, or 3 in terms of fastest growing cities, you've got a lot of people coming into the city. For instance, however the government establishes what people groups, what ethnicities come to the Austin area, we have a lot of folks from Burma. And so as we look at that population and we look at the size of the city, we say, hey, rather than plant just one church for, Burmese-speaking folks, let's look at planting one south, one central, and one north, and, really engaging those people. Do we have, any believers in that we could grow up into that? Per your discussion about Spanish-speaking pastors, yes, they have many of them, because they're bivocational or partially funded by the churches. They have day jobs, and then what they're doing is they're trying to connect with those people and putting them into churches. Interestingly enough, one of the biggest needs that we have right now is English-speaking Spanish culture churches, because you do have the second generation of people that are looking to go to church, and they celebrate much of their ethnic heritage, but they want their services in English. So, for instance, they would have quinceañeras, whereas a typical Anglo church might not, have those kinds of things. They might want to have Spanish bread rather than, donuts for a gathering and these kinds of things. But what we're trying to do is to provide opportunities for as many expressions of churches so that anybody who comes is looking for, a connection and an inroad there.
As these newer churches are planted and growing, largely Spanish-speaking or the Burmese community, how do you help the larger, more established Anglo churches kind of see those changes and help them understand that this is the right thing?
So one of the things that we do that engages that larger church is we say, in an Austin, Texas, it's very difficult to rent a place. It's almost impossible to buy a place. All the open land is just beyond, the scope of a smallish church. And so one of the things that we've done is we've gone to the larger churches and said, hey, listen, if we find a congregation that's meeting and this is your building, your facility is pretty centrally located to where those people are coming from, because many of them are using public transportation, could you find a space in your building to where they could come and they could meet and have services, so we're able to save as much as possible on that rent piece, and maybe we can pay the pastor a little bit more. Fast forward to the fact that, all across the country you're reading about churches that are shutting down. They've missed generations of people, and now they've gotten so small, there's just, the thing for them to do is to close down. A lot of them will deed their property back to the association, because our first move is not to sell. but to try to retain the legacy of the church. We have 4 properties and 13 congregations meeting in those 4 buildings. Now, it becomes a logistical management kind of thing, and of course we tease everybody that we all know that the Lord prefers going to worship at 11 o'clock on Sunday morning. But in churches like that, they'll have 5 different times over the course of a Sunday. Some are meeting on Saturday, but the other thing that we're finding is a lot of people realize that you can do church on any day of the week. And that's a pretty big mental shift for a lot of people. But if we're going to, reach Austin, we're going to have an expression of church that's meeting other than just Sunday morning at 11 o'clock.
As far as I've been led to believe that prayer is okay any day other than Sunday.
Absolutely, yes. Absolutely. Yeah, in fact, 1 Thessalonians, pray without ceasing. It's pretty difficult to do that. Yeah.
So then how does this play out in the context of not just the immigration debate nationally, but, in Texas with the border debate? Literally, it feels like it's at your doorstep.
Yep. Excellent question. Thanks for asking. So you can imagine with that many churches, with that many pastors, and they don't all come through the same theological training schools. We could have some real intense debates. What does the Bible say? And I've seen people argue same verses of Scripture and, at times kind of scratch my head on that. So what we have attempted to do is to say, listen, if we don't all agree that this verse, this theological position is like yours, rather than just saying, we're not going to do anything, what we have said or what I have promoted is to say, guys, listen, we know that we're to love our neighbor. And again, I'm making this very simplistic. Sure. So, let's do this. We're on the north side of the border. Let's figure out how we can go and show love to our neighbors down there. Now, you've got people who are absolutely not let anybody across. But they can at least agree with you that, well, if people come across, then evidently they've, if they've been vetted and they've got all their paperwork, let's love them. To our Spanish-speaking churches, whichever direction they take it, let's make connection with churches on the other side, and let's figure out how we can love them. But Ali, what I've found is once they get there and start serving people, it seems that in a lot of cases that the dogmatic, I'm going to grind you into my position seems to get softened there because they begin to meet people, they begin to know stories. And I'll literally have churches come back and go, hey, listen, we've come back, we had a great experience, we're going to do more. We've seen what we can do to help with this and help with this and that kind of thing. And that seems to be the easiest way to begin to help people understand this immigration issue by getting your hands in the dirt, by getting to know some people that are there. And again, I'm coming back to my preference towards prayer. Man, I just tell them, I said, if you went down and you were seeing people coming across, you're providing for their physical needs, just ask them this question: what do you need God to do for you today? How can I pray for you? How can I be of assistance to you? And that really has really helped in a big way. The knockdown, drag-out debates just have not seemed to melt people's hearts.
One idea that we've really been trying to grapple with here is that a lot of this debate boils down, particularly with the communities that you're working with every day. It's a question of, are we a nation of laws or a nation of grace?
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
When you see that church or that individual who is, nobody should be able to cross.
Yep.
Do you see that when they take that action of grace, it informs their position on how we are a nation of laws?
Yes, absolutely. I wish they could have said it just like you did. But it does inform them, and what it does, it becomes a heart issue, not only a head issue.
Yeah.
It's real easy to make a whole lot of declarations, but when you're there and when you see what's going on and what's happening, and what's amazing, I don't have to go and say, you're going to go there and this is going to happen to you. I can simply say, would you be willing to go? And again, I'm going to default back to prayer. I'd say before you go, you need to pray and ask God what He would have you to go. Is it going to be good for you to go, and is it good to be you to serve, or is it going to be better for you to send money down to partners that we've got along the border? And invariably, and not universally, but in more times than I could tell you, they'll come back and they'll say, you know what, I think I'm going to send somebody, but I want to go. And there's something about them feeling a prompting to say, you know, I've seen all the coverage. I just want to kind of see this thing for myself. Mm-hmm. The great thing in the state of Texas, you've got so many Baptist ministries that are along the border that they can really pick and choose. You know, I want to go do this. I want to go do this. I want to be assistants in this way or that way.
So then when they come back, do you feel like their pastor then senses within their congregation that they have a little bit more running room to talk about these issues? Or are we even there yet?
No. You're spot on, and obviously, you know, you're wrestling with these kinds of things. So, you know, here I am, a pastor. I've got my position. I've decided that I am or I am not going to preach on immigration. So you think about that. You know, even just as 200 churches, you've got different opinions. Imagine what an average pastor is dealing with in his church.
Right.
But when somebody comes back, let's you know, we'll pick on Smith. That's my name. You know, Joe and Sue Smith, they come back. And the pastor wants to talk about immigration. What does he do? Tell their story.
Right.
Hey, the Smiths went down to the border because they were just, you know, they just felt like this was a way to show God's love. And they're not, you know, violating the law or keeping the law or doing anything. They're just showing the love of Jesus. And I just want to ask you, how are you showing the love of Jesus where you're at, what you're doing? Because, again, that's one of the big challenges we have. People go to do mission trips all over the place, and then they come back and don't do anything. And I have seen more of our pastors say that they have seen that as being catalytic in helping the rest of the people. Now, when I know that the Smiths come back, I'll say, hey, listen, I want to ask the pastor over here, could he give you a call and tell you about what's going on? Or we call it the empty seat. When your church goes again, would you allow me in our publications or in our way of communicating to the churches to put out to all the other 199 churches to say, hey, we got a group out in Pflugerville. I'm just picking on them. Mm-hmm. Pick a group in Pflugerville that's going to be going down to the border. If you'd like to go, they've got it all together. This is the cost that would be involved, but you don't have to plan. You just go and participate. Mm-hmm. And then we've seen some really cool synergy, you know, in those churches come together.
I mean, you really just, I think, answered my next question because, you know, we're based in Washington, D.C., so we're clearly part of the problem, right? But I am always kind of trying to think through, okay, how do you make the connection between that individual, the Smith that goes to the border and serves, and then tell that story in a bigger way? Because not everybody can do that.
That's right.
Right? But I mean, what you're talking about is it's not just the relationship, but then how do you kind of tell that story?
Yeah. So we tell the people, I would tell the Smiths when they come back, I said, first of all, go to your pastor. Tell your pastor, thank you for, you know, blessing me and letting me go. Sometimes they'll say, well, he wasn't very excited about it. Well, then just go and tell him, you know, the experience that I have. But I tell people that the world at large, even the people that you're working with, that might not be Christ followers, you can talk to them about what you did and how you did it and the experience that you had. Don't put any judgment on it. Don't put yourself in a position where you're defending one position or the other, and then just ask them, what do you think about that? How do you feel about that? And that seems to really go. You know, I'm not a huge Facebook person, but, you know, I'll have people put your story on Facebook. You know, let your friends kind of chime in. Let them like it. If they like it, call them up and say, hey, listen, next time I go, I'd love for you to go and to participate in it. But I really think as the stories begin to go and people begin to share that, that's where it really kind of takes off.
Now, is there a particular pastor or family that, you don't have to share their name, but you saw kind of make that journey and come back with a completely different opinion?
I did. Yes, we had a family at a church, you know, centrally located here. They decided they wanted to go to the border. I think initially their idea was we're going to take clothes. And so they began to collect clothes, and they took them down with them. They came back as a nuclear family, talked about what would we like to do. We would like to do something that's unique about us. So they came to me and they said, hey, we'd like to buy a lot of Spanish, English Bibles so that you have, you know, both translations there. This would be a great way for them to learn English, you know, with the Spanish right next to them. And now as they go on these trips, this is kind of their thing. We want to hand you a Bible. We want to tell you we love you and these kinds of things. And this family is now engaging other families to say, hey, come and go with us there. It's highly unusual for them to just come back and go, I don't think I'm ever going to go again. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the things that obviously for me as a person of faith, I'm feeling like God's hand's got to be on this. So all of these people are giving up time and away from work to go there, and they're coming back and going, yeah, that was a good thing.
Toughest step, I think, is that act of service, to provide that Bible and have that conversation. Then do people start asking the question, okay, what is the system behind this situation? And does the community start to transition to asking the question about how is our government helping, hindering, facilitating, or not this process of immigration?
Yeah, so what happens there, great question, is that then they'll come back and they'll say, hey, I want to make a connection. We'll speak very specifically towards our Spanish-speaking friends, from Mexico. They'll say, hey, you know what, I need to have a better relationship with one of our Spanish-speaking churches. And it helps them because typically the average person, the average Anglo person is going to go, oh, everybody that speaks Spanish, they're all in the same boat. No, if you're Cuban, there's a uniqueness there. And if you're interior Mexico, there's a uniqueness there. If you're in the borderlands, I don't know, that might not be the exact word for it. And so these families will begin to develop partnerships with our Spanish-speaking churches. And what I really love is when they say, hey, we've now connected with Primera Iglesia, wherever, and we're going to begin to work with their families, or we're going to help them. Out of all of this, we've had a couple of attorneys, not that this is a brand new thing, but to say we're going to help people with immigration issues because we have. And so here's an attorney who is, his education and his training is in another area. He has learned through an immigration attorney to say, how can we help these churches? One of my favorite things is when we'll have a Saturday fair at one of our churches where people can go through, all the paperwork process to be able to do that. Yeah. My hope and dream would be that our churches would begin to start adopting actual families. That for me, that would be a very powerful tool, so that as families were identified, we can call the Austin Baptist Association because they're looking to take on families, to adopt them, to sponsor them, whatever that looks like.
Well, I mean, this is amazing, and thank you very much for the incredible work the association does. Well, so my last question is, so the name of the podcast is Only in America.
Okay.
And the question is, just to finish the sentence, Only in America, ...
Only in America do we have an opportunity and the resources to really make a significant impact in this area of immigration. I really think the combination of those two, the opportunity and the resources together, make it unique. And I hope that we take, this wealth and the resources that God has given us and use it in a way that truly honors Him, truly advances His kingdom. And I'm looking forward to taking and encouraging the churches, under my leadership to say, hey, listen, let's join together with the larger body of Christ in this great country to make a difference.
Dr. David Smith is the Executive Director of the Austin Baptist Association. You can find more about Dr. Smith at our website, immigrationforum.org. And if you like what you hear, take a second to subscribe to Only in America, and please leave us a review. Only in America is produced and edited by Emily Chow, Joanna Taylor, and Megan Wetmore. I'm Ali Nirane. Thank you for listening to Only in America, and I will talk to you next week.